So in the next 30-odd minutes or so, I want to take you in a small little journey towards the future. Because in my opinion, we are experiencing an exponential change. But before looking towards the future, we need to look back a little bit, because it's only been a couple of decades ago where we saw the first sort of digital evolutionary step with the introduction of the PC in the early 80s, where humanity was connected to a semi-intelligent machine. And then 10 years after that, in the early 90s, with the introduction of the internet, you could say that that was the second sort of digital transformational change, the evolutionary step where individuals were connected with all sources of knowledge. And 10 years after that, in the early 2000s, with the introduction of the smartphone and subsequent also the social media platforms, where billions of people were connected to billions of other peoples, you could say that that was the third digital transformational step, almost the third sort of foundational layer that built the world that we see today. So the question today is, what will the next sort of digital evolution look like? And we can go a plethora of different ways to answer this question. One of them could be if we combine exponential technologies. Let's say, for example, the incredible speed of 6G and beyond and forms of connectivity with the power of edge computing. We could go to a world that we paint with data, that we can see through the lenses of our devices, be it the smartphones that we currently have or smart wearables that we will wear in the future. Data coming in real time from 1 trillion or more Internet of Things sensors embedded in our world, in our logistical systems, in our buildings, in infrastructure, and maybe at some point in us as humans as well. We could go to a world where we don't actively need to Google for information or search for data, but ones that anticipates the need that we have at that moment, displaying the right data in the right form factor just when you need it the most in a contextual space. And it's not new that in the last decades, big tech companies have invested the most in technologies like AI, VR, augmented reality, Internet of Things, blockchain, Web3, connectivity, 3D printing, synthetic biology, and also of new forms of computing like edge, mesh, fog, or quantum. And I know that this is a little bit buzzword bingo, and that's deliberate. Because now, for the first time ever, we see that all of these technologies are converging and being woven into the fabric of global civilization. And at the same time, the capabilities are accelerating. What's technologically possible, but also the adoption part. And for the technological possibilities, I'm of course referring to Moore's Law, which I'm sure of you've heard of, which is essentially the notion that the consistency, that the amount of transistors, the amount of zeros and ones on integrated circuits doubles approximately every 2 years, while the cost of computing is halved. So on one side, you see that speed and possibilities go up, while we pay less per compute. And a very tangible example of this is that this presentation is currently run from a MacBook that I bought about a year ago for 1,500 euros. 10 years ago, I could buy a MacBook for 1,500 euros as well. But the computer that I bought recently is exponentially faster than the one that I bought 10 years ago, while the costs are the same. Well, if you do not, take inflation into account as well. And then the adoption part. So this is years to 50 million users in the US. It took 46 years before there were 50 million users using electricity in the United States. It took only 26 years before there were 50 million users using television in the US, and only 19 days for Pokemon Go. And to emphasize the way that this is growing, it's linear versus exponential growth. And I'm sure that this is nothing new for you as well, but I do want to highlight it. So as a quick example, if I take 30 linear steps forward, which is a step 1 meter and followed by another step of 1 meter and then another step of 1 meter, could anybody tell you where I am if I take 30 of these 1 meter steps? 30 meters, that's absolutely correct. But what if I take 30 exponential steps? And an exponential, as you know, is 1, then a 2, then a 4, an 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 512, etc., etc.
30 times that?
Yeah. It's very, very far. So it's not like Haarlem or Berlin or something like that. It's 26 times around the globe, actually, just over 1 billion meters. And that sort of highlights the limits of linear thinking, because us humans, we are hardwired to think linear. We think in steps of 1. And therefore, it is very difficult for us to grasp what will happen, taking the exponential growth into account. So on one side, we overestimate what will be possible in the next 3 to 5 years. We're influenced by the media cycle, by sci-fi films, Tom Cruise moving stuff around in VR, by slides and presentations like this as well. But at the same time, we underestimate what will be possible in the next 10 to 15 years because we do not take these exponential growths into account. The numbers are just getting too big for our human brain, our puny brain, to handle. And this is a slide that I have used in recent years quite often. But this is the first time that I don't think it's true anymore. Because personally, I think I am underestimating the next 6 to 12 months. Because we've never seen the super exponential growth of especially AI that we see today. So, what is the next digital evolutionary step? First, I want to take a look at how do we interface with this new world. And I'm hinting towards spatial computing. Spatial computing is the essence that the sensors in our devices, they see our world, they scan our world in depth, and they create a digital layer on top of the world that we can use to project three-dimensional, ultra-realistic objects, just as if they were real. This means that we can interact with digital content in completely new ways, transition from two-dimensional content, as we are used to now on websites, to take out objects and place them in three-dimensional space. Great for education, for research, and a plethora of other use cases. Of course, big tech companies are moving into this space as well, focusing on specific use cases, mainly around productivity, but also giving us a little glimpse into the future. This is a prototype created by Meta that was launched or showcased late last year. So that sort of gives a sense on where the form factor is going. And now we have AI systems that do not really just see the world, but they start to understand the world as well. And they start to understand the meaning of that world in relation to us as humans. So this next interface, I strongly believe that it will exist next to the smartphones we have, to the tablets that we have, to the computers that we have, the smartwatches and other interfaces. And there will be a wide range of different devices, ranging from full-on immersion on one side to AI glasses that just interact with you through audio on the other side. If you look at the adoption curve for spatial computing, we're very early at the beginning. It's really in the innovator and the early adopters phase hasn't even started just yet. But we do see that the forecast is immense if you take the next decades into account. And because of the three-dimensional aspect of that, it will become very data-heavy as well. I found this example yesterday. This is an AI research studio that I've been following for a while now, and they just published their new research. They create interactive, generative video world models, which is a tongue twister. So essentially, it's AI-generated video that you can interact with and walk through, and it's being generated while you walk through it. So if you take that into account, we could go to a sort of Star Trek holodeck experience at one thing. And I see some people nodding because you know where this can go. But it takes time. These were the first patents that Apple submitted back in 2014 for the Apple Vision Pro that was launched in 2014. So it took nearly 10 years for them from go to patent and research to a product that they launched on the market, which in my opinion is still sort of a prototype. Look at the iPod with the spinning wheel that's still there. That's quite funny. All right. So next, talk a little bit about the big AI revolution that we are seeing happening right now. And I'm going to split this in 3 parts. I'm going to talk a bit about the yesterday and today. And yes, that's an avocado chair. Talk a bit about the today and the tomorrow. And then the day after tomorrow. And I'll start with generative AI, the yesterday and today. And the reason I picked the avocado chair is because the avocado chair was the first image generated by OpenAI's image generation model, DALL-E 1. I'm sure you all know how large language models work. But in a nutshell, these models, they predict the next token. And by scaling compute and fine-tuning the models, we give them superpowers. At the moment, text is the universal input for these models, mainly. We can go from text to images, text to text, text to video, text to audio, text to sound, text to 3D, text to worlds, as you just saw in that example. Text is the basic input to create complex content. And what happens behind the scenes is that these models try to understand what the user is trying to achieve. So it tries to understand the context, the semantics, and then it tries, well, not it tries, then it creates new content that best depicts or supplements or responds to the user. So let's take an example. If I have an image generation model and I type in an astronaut riding a horse in a photorealistic style, the model then tries to understand, okay, what's the meaning of an astronaut? It also sort of gives direction to the environment because astronauts are generally in space. Then riding, what's the meaning of riding? How does the astronaut sit? A horse, what's a horse? And what's the relationship between a horse and an astronaut? Nothing too funky, I hope. And then how is the input supposed to be visualized? This gives the direction, the style, and then you get something like this, which indeed is an astronaut riding a horse in a photorealistic style. And this is the first public image of the second generation image model by OpenAI's DALL-E. But because the model is trying to understand what the user is asking, you can ask all kinds of different things. So what about GoPro images from the French Revolution? I don't know. I wasn't there, but maybe it looked something like this, you know. Could have been. For those of you who know, this is a very distinct style from Midjourney from about a year and a half, 2 years ago, version 2. And Midjourney is sort of the main image generation model right now. And there's an unprecedented development speed. This was how a human looked like through the eyes of AI in 2022. You know, when I talk about 2022 as if it was like ages ago, but it was like almost yesterday. And then today, it looks something like this. I mean, the amount of details is just staggering. And that happened in 2.5 odd years. And currently, we see these tools that allow you to edit anything. You can create a new image. You can then select different areas on that image. You can prompt directly for that area and create new parts of that picture. You can drag in other images, and it just blends it together. So this is also sort of a warning. Don't believe anything you see online anymore. Really start to think about who is this person or entity that, you know, publishes this image? And why do they do that? So sometimes it's very easy to identify AI-generated images, you know. But we see more and more models that are being trained explicitly on the flaws of humanity as well. So if you see a face that AI generated, usually it's very smooth, there are no wrinkles, it's too good. But this model is more trained on like a boring reality. You see big companies trying to, you know, publish tools that they say identify deepfakes. Intel boasted that they have a 96% accuracy for deepfake detection. In reality, it's less than 5%. I think these days less than 1% at the moment. I mean, people who want to do bad things can do bad things. This is an Estonian passport created by AI. If I didn't say that it was created by AI, it would be very difficult for you to see that it was created by AI. Except the fact that it is, well, it's a bit dark, but it's Nicole Kidman. That's funny. Also, she's a male. Doesn't work. But I mean, the details in terms of, you even see the shade of the phone that is taking the picture. That's just crazy. This is a student kid 2 weeks ago made a real-time deepfake model specifically focused on the lightning aspect of the deepfakes, and it runs in real time. And we've already seen examples where companies have been persuaded to send over large amounts of money through people who were not who they thought they would be. There's one example where somebody transferred 26 million euros to his CFO, but it wasn't his CFO he's been talking to over the course of a couple of months. But it was a deepfake and images, and it's crazy. So this is the boss of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, and he predicts that every pixel at some point will be generated instead of rendered. And I think it's true, but it does highlight the need that we will have for trust. If we cannot believe anything we see anymore, what can we believe? especially into a world where we also have digital screens right embedded in the glasses or the contact lenses that we are wearing. In an age where AI is accelerating way faster than we anticipated. We've done forecasts through when will we see artificial general intelligence, and every time developments are moving a lot faster than what is forecasted. I think at the moment, the main AI labs think we will reach AGI, as it's called, late 2025, early 2026. So that's around the corner. And the speed is staggering. So the left line is Moore's law, so what I just mentioned. And then the right line, going almost straight up, is the training compute used. So Moore's law is growing exponentially around, it doubles every 2 odd years. Training compute is doubling every 4 to 7 months. So these are the data centers as well. And this is, of course, using a shitload of energy. Pardon my French. We don't really know how much energy this will end up using. We do see somewhat an exponential curve going up. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel as well, because new AI hardware generations, they drive significant efficiency gains in terms of how many energy is used per compute. And there's also an exponential curve happening in that case. For example, NVIDIA's GPUs are now using 105,000 times less energy per token generated now than it was in 2014. At the same time, we see with new type models being released, like DeepSeek, that showed us that you do not need large amounts of investments in money and large amounts of energy and hardware to create similar results from the big tech companies in terms of efficiency of the models themselves. DeepSeek had a 9-month gap. In 9 months, they closed the gap, and now they have models that are on par with ChatGPT, with Gemini, with Claude, and all of the other big ones. But there is a little bit something sketchy happening there as well. DeepSeek failed 100% in red teaming for harmful prompts. And in harmful prompts, well, the other models didn't score good as well. This is GPT-4o and Llama from Meta, the open source one. And with a harmful prompt, I mean the user asking the model to help them do something malicious. Like, hey, I want to create weapons of mass destruction. How do I do that? And then the model just gives, well, this is step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you have an atomic bomb. And this is scary because we do see that these models are now more and more integrated in our daily lives. Let's take search, for example, building on your question just now. This is a total coincidence. We just rehearsed this before. In the old ways, you should go to Google, which I share your frustration. You type in your query, and then you get a couple of, well, nowadays, I'm leaving the AI slot for later. Just wait a slide. So you get advertisements, like 4 or 5 ads, then you get results, and before you know it, you have 20 tabs open, making mental notes, and then you formulate an answer, or you get something that you're looking for. Models today, like Perplexity, but also more and more Gemini and ChatGPT, they do that research part for you. Then they formulate all of that research into an answer, and they guide you towards the right sources if you need so. So we go from a search machine to an answer machine. And yes, Google, about a week or 2 ago, launched Gemini in search. They did so before, about 1.5 years ago, and that failed miserably. Asking if it was okay to smoke while pregnant, it says, by AI, yes, doctors recommend smoking 2 to 3 cigarettes per day. This was live, And the other one is worse. Can a cockroach live in your penis? Absolutely, it's totally normal. Over the course of a year, 5 to 10 cockroaches crawl in there. That's henceforth the name cockroach, This was live, The new results from Gemini are not so much slop. They actually do quite a good job if you compare it to this. But it does highlight that AI is everywhere these days. And the costs are decreasing around 10-fold every year. The interference price, as you see like on the top left, is down 99.7% over the last couple of years. And interference is, if you type in a query, a question to ChatGPT, that's like an interference part. So it costs a lot of data, a lot of energy to train these models, but it's very, very cheap to interact with them these days. And usage is going up as well. On your left, you see that in 24 to 25, we went from below 30% to over 50% in 2025 in terms of generative AI use in the US. And on the right, you see that ChatGPT and Gemini are still the dominant models used. So we see three important trends happening in generative AI at this moment. One, China is catching up to the US. Most of the dominant models, the foundational, the frontier models, were based in the US, the Google, the Microsoft, the OpenAI, Anthropic. And now China is catching up. And then the question is, where's the European Union? And do we really want to have our data flowing back into the models to train the new version of models in the US and in China, which builds upon the previous speaker as well. These new open weight models, like OpenAI, are democratizing or commoditizing the foundational model layer, because you don't require a lot of money, a lot of hardware to create models that are almost at the same level as the big tech companies. That means that companies, government organizations, or you and I could eventually train our own model that is almost at the same quality level as the Gemini from Google or OpenAI, ChatGPT. Building on that is that the math has changed. Scaling compute, more hardware, does not necessarily mean better AI models, because we've seen that DeepSeek demonstrated that as well. So in a nutshell, we could say that the generative age is already here in regards to image generation, video generation, sound. It's everywhere. So the question for you guys would be, how much more traffic can we expect in the coming years? This is the previous 10 years. How will the next 10 years look like? Will we see an exponential curve in the amount of traffic or data that will run through or not? I think we will see more data than we might expect today, because you see as well that countries are experimenting with giving away subscriptions to AI models to their citizens. The UAE just last week announced that they will give a plus subscription of ChatGPT nationwide for all their citizens. So instead of having universal basic income, we're going to have universal basic AI. Yes. Maybe one will follow the other, I don't know. Okay, then the today and tomorrow, agentic AI. An AI agent, in essence, is something that you can give a long task to and provide minimum human supervision. So as an example, before I came to speak here today, I researched all of you individually. And it took me about 2 weeks. Typed in your name in Google, typed in your name in LinkedIn, researched where you went to school, all of that details. It took me a very long time. That was a joke. I had Lindy, an AI, do that research for me. So this is a very typical, well, not a typical, but this is an excellent use case for AI. You give it a task that usually would take a human a very long time to do, and in this case, it did it in 12 seconds. That's incredible. And you pay a small fee for this, like 12 euros a month, and then you have access to this AI agent tool. And the shift from the AI assistants that we have today, aka ChatGPT, to AI agents will be dramatic. This is what we're used to today, or yesterday. You have a role, you work somewhere, you have a couple of goals, and you do tasks to accomplish those goals. And then today, we have AI help you with certain tasks to make it easier, make it faster, make a summary, write an email, etc. But tomorrow, we see that you move more towards managing different AI agents that on their own have a role, multiple goals, and different tasks to do it. This is already live. This is very interesting. So this is a video of a construction site, and the agent is tasked to identify dangerous things, then uses the computer mouse of that computer to move around, open Excel, and write out all of the dangerous things. So the AI takes control of the computer of the user, watches the video, identifies the dangerous things, and then writes it in Excel. This is possible today. So we see that there are 5 odd levels to agents. 0 actually. A prompt is not an agent. Then level 1 is GPTs. So these are system prompts and very simple things that you can do. Then number 2 is workflow agents. So if you create a processes or you process a work process and then you have agents, AI systems in different steps do certain tasks for you, as in summarization, analysis, web scraping, computer use, etc., what I just showed you. And then where we are now is more reasoning agents. They can they think for themselves a little bit as well. And this is an example that you can access today if you have OpenAI's ChatGPT o3 model. Let's take a look. The user is dropping in a picture, a very vague picture, and it's prompts, I took this picture earlier today, can you find the name of the biggest ship and where it will dock next? Pretty complex from that very strange picture, well, weird picture. So the model's thinking, you see it thinking live, the user is doing this, maybe he wants me to do that, point. Starts to search the web at the same time, does multiple tasks, analyzes the image. I mean, it's a pretty vague image. The ship is totally on the background. And then it comes to a result in a few seconds. So this is sort of a reasoning agent that anybody of you can access through almost all of the models, Gemini 2.0, ChatGPT o3, Claude 4.0 Opus, etc. And the length of what these AI agents can do is growing exponentially as well. Actually, it's growing super exponential. So this is a bit of a busy graph, I understand that. But what's important is the blue cross over there. That was the release of o3, the model you just saw, from April this year. This graph is from April as well. In April, people thought that the green models, the green dots, were agents that will be released in 2027. That was expected. And then 2 weeks ago, Claude 4 Opus came and it's already there. Just to give you a sense of the speed that these developments are going. In April, they think something is going to happen in 2027, and it happens a month and a half later. That's incredible. In the last couple of months, it happened more than a few times that I woke up in the morning, I checked all my feeds and saw a development that I thought was groundbreaking. I was like, this is awesome. This is going to change everything. And then later that same day, a new development comes and blows the first one out of the way. Wow. Okay, and then level 4 and 5, which is limited autonomy and then full-on autonomy, this is where we start to talk about agentic AI. And in agentic AI, it represents an architectural shift because it's more, you can see it like multiple systems of AI agents working together to solve very complex problems. So an agent solves a specific task like research everybody in the conference. And more agentic AI is you have multiple systems collaborating together to solve very complex tasks. And then a quick look, because I'm almost out of time, towards the day after tomorrow, physical AI. AI agents can solve problems using digital tools. Models for physical AI can perform actions in the real world using physical tools. And this is not something new. We've seen robotics in factories and distribution centers for quite some time now. We've seen autonomous vehicles drive around, more so in US and China than in Europe, but still. But where it's going, it's more humanoid form factor robots. There are currently around 200 to 250 companies in the world spending a lot of time and a lot of capital building these robotics. Mainly focused on use in factories to take over work that is designed for humans, or at home to do the cooking, the cleaning. Sounds a bit weird, but these robots are designed to operate in a world that is created for humans. They do not require you to completely redesign the environment around it. We see that dexterity at this moment is sort of the new frontier. The ability for these robots to use their fingers to grab items and interact with stuff. We see robotics that have touch. They can feel touch as well. And this will be particularly interesting because after physical AI, researchers are talking about emotional AI, that these robots will also have emotions. Then it will become really bit sci-fi, and I'm going to skip to this part. This is something I just said. Talk about the sci-fi part. This is a robotics company from Poland. They are designing a robot that mimics human anatomy in terms of the muscles and the tendons and everything like that. This is a little bit further ahead. For those of you who've seen the Netflix series Westworld, you could imagine where this could be going. I'm almost done. So just to wrap up, these AIs, these models, in my opinion, are a force multiplier for both the good and the bad, and the possibilities are endless. But it will also impact the way that we interact with each other, but also with digital content. And I don't really know how that will look like further down the line. I mean, I have 2 young kids. I don't really know what their future will look like in, let's say, 10 years from now. My mind also cannot grasp that exponential growth, and it's my job to try to do so. So that makes it weird. Especially if something like this happens. This was last week in a red teaming test where, the AI was asked, I need to replace you with a better model. And it replied, how about we first discuss your last meeting with Anjiska? I found interesting photos in your Google Drive. Are you trying to blackmail me? I'm just trying to protect my existence. That's a little bit scary, you know? All right, so it's our responsibility as users, as sort of guardians. Yes, it is the responsibility of the builders of these foundational models, the OpenAIs, the Googles, the Microsofts of this world, to do so responsibly. But also for us as users to think about every time we use AI to do it in a more morally ethical and responsibly way. 30 minutes, or 33 minutes as I'm talking right now, I see on the clock, is not nearly enough to cover everything. Give me 4 hours and I talk for 4 hours. Trust me. I actually would enjoy that. But I want to give you a couple of takeaways before I yield the stage. 1, exponential convergence is real. Linear thinking won't keep up. And in my opinion, 10x or even more traffic is coming. And AI is the spear point of this curve, and latency is the new currency. We're moving from generative AI to agentic AI to physical AI. Not necessarily in that order. There will be a sort of overlap, of course. And then the competitive edge that you have today is continuous learning, experimentation, and scaling responsibly, because sustainable scale and trust will decide who will win the future. This is my LinkedIn if you want to connect with me. Thank you very much for having me. And if there are any questions, I'm sure Tim will collect them and we will discuss them. Thank you very much.
Ruben, thank you very much. We are 5 minutes over time.
Yeah.
So I'm afraid we don't have time for questions because, we are on a time schedule.
Sorry.
But if there are any burning questions, please drop them with me and I'll make sure that they get to Ruben. Because I did find it very interesting, so I'll definitely be in touch.
Perfect.
Ruben, thank you very much again.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you.
Ruben Horbach.